I don't know what to talk about for the intro for once.
You normally have something.
I know.
If you don't, I'm already bullshitting before we hit record.
I've suddenly gone all introvert. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't want to be here. The camera's on me.
It's
really
perfect.
Right? It's segues nicely. On that note, Misfits, quick, play the credits. From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I'm your host, Christopher Sellers.
From Portland, Oregon, I'm Broedy Ipox.
And we are your professional misfits, where we riff on the B-sides of professional life. And welcome, misfits, to Season 3, Episode 7. And we're discussing introverts versus extroverts. Who's better? Who'd win in a fight? Let's find out. It's gonna be really, really interesting, I think. And this is something I'm personally really invested in. There's one book in particular. I may as well plug it now because we'll talk about it a bit. It's called Quiet by Susan Cain. It came out probably 5 to 10 years ago. And it utterly shifted my scope and presented like a lot of meaning to what introversion actually is. Because I think from the two, that's the one that's more misunderstood. Before we dive into that, Broedy, hot take. Well, are you an introvert or are you more of an extrovert? Like, where do you feel that you land on the scale?
I think it depends on the day of the week.
Interesting.
I mean, it's strange because, like, I wouldn't say I'm a social butterfly. Like, it's not like I come into an event and I just try to light up the room. But there are moments in time that I can catch the energy of the room and I know where to go with it. And I will, but
yes,
I'm going to be honest with you. That shit is exhausting. And I think I would personally rather be at home working on my stuff or playing guitar or hanging out with my kids than actually out there expending my energy on that kind of stuff. Interesting
take. All right, let's get into it. But before we discuss introverts and extroverts, here's a quick word from our sponsor. Misfit cereal is delicious. You can find all the Misfit cereal and get all the extra bonuses, get bonus episodes and 2 weeks advanced episodes at Camp Misfit. Go to promisfitpodcast.com, check out Camp Misfit. Let's get into it. So, Broedy, introvert, I'm going to share this with you first because I like definitions for specificity. I'm going to give you the definition, the dictionary definition of an introvert and the dictionary definition of an extrovert. And this is what's kind of interesting. So in the Oxford, an introvert is described as a shy, reticent person. And the example they give is, I'm an introvert because I don't like public speaking. So let's just put a pin in that there for a moment. Now, an extrovert, almost in parallel to this, is an outgoing, socially confident person. So if you were certain commenters on LinkedIn who like to define the world by dictionary definitions,
don't like those definitions.
Hey, man. Right, yeah. So introversion is like at one end of the scale and fits that cliche stereotype, whereas extroverts are like way down the other end of the scale. And it seems to be a binary proposition. So you can you can either be one or the other. Now, we've learned this not to be so accurate. So in your take, what's an introvert to you, or who is an introvert to you, or what qualities do you feel that someone who is more of an introvert would have?
Yeah, I mean, you asked me that, and I obviously was triggered by the definition. I don't. It's strange to me because, like I said, I think in my definition of an introvert, it's someone that recognizes that they don't like to expend energy socially.
That's a really fucking good definition. Yeah.
And I think it's truly as simple as that. And there's a huge umbrella of things that accompany that, right? Like, so if I have anxiety, that might be the reason I don't like
Mhm.
social events or people or interacting in that way, or shit, I just might like my kids more than I like random ass motherfuckers trying to get me to drink beer and shit, you know, like it just might be that. And I don't think that it has anything to do with timidness or necessarily
Being
just being
socially
shy.
awkward
Yeah,
or
I don't think that's an introvert. And it's also a little triggering because, like I said, I feel like I fall a little more on that side of the scale. But saying it like that, that's how I'm viewing it in my head, is it's kind of like a sliding scale, right?
yes,
And you can get either side of the spectrum for sure. And I imagine that there's extremes and you can classify them as an introvert or an extrovert. But
yes,
I think there's a lot more middle people that are just like, you know, it's the situation and it's the people. Because I said that and I instantly went to a place where I was like, but if it was my friends and family, I could be
yes.
there all fucking day. I could be there all day. It
It's really
wouldn't tap
interesting.
me out. I would recharge from that. So that's like
Yes.
the definition of the extrovert, socially confident and fucking. But again, I still think if I had the choice, it would probably be a little bit more by myself. So
Hmm.
that's the definition of introvert for me. And extrovert, I feel like, again, kind of on the opposite side of the scale, knowingly and um, you know, and joyfully so, has the social aspect.
Hmm.
That's what feeds them. That it isn't the solitary component that recharges the battery. It's being out in that environment that
Hmm.
recharges the battery. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't. Those definitions kind of annoyed the shit out of me. So what is it for you? Because it can't be that black and white. It just can't.
No. Well, no. I agree that it isn't, and I agree that it isn't. But I'd say up until reading Quiet, there was a real struggle with acceptance of this sort of thing, and I think a lot of confusion. One of the big arguments she makes, Susan Cain, who wrote the book, and she's an American, so it's interesting. She's writing on introversion and extroversion within America, which is a predominantly extroverted culture, and
Mm-hmm.
that's celebrated. And she's like, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, in the world of you know, great leaders and bombastic, you know, whatever. You know, what about the quiet thinkers? You know, and they tend to be overshadowed in a culture like this. So, you know, what do they do well? What skills do they have? What are they overlooking? And, you know, again, is it genetic? Is it personality? Is it social? Like you touched on. And so it's a really, really great book. And I recommend everyone to read it. I recommend, and I did another search, I recommend that you avoid everything on Google, because Google throws up, here's the 4 types of introverts. Here's, you know, here's 6 signs that you're an introvert. Here's like
5
this,
million different boxes.
yeah, and all of this stuff was the rush to capitalize on you know, profile boxes, personality profile boxes, after this book had been written. And Susan makes the point, like, this is a cultural perspective of something. And even in the chapters, she, like, as a comparison, you know, you've got America, and America is probably the archetype of an extroverted cultural social nation.
Agreed. Yeah.
Then you can look at Japan or China as the archetype of an introverted
Yep.
social nation, right? So it's not good or bad, better or worse. It's identifying strengths and weaknesses. And Susan's assertion in her book was that in Western cultures, introverts are more often misunderstood, dismissed, not listened to, disregarded, all these sorts of things, and you're overlooking and misunderstanding a huge potential, personally, professionally, of working in this way. So how do you do that? So there's some context, and me, I guess it was a real. I don't say this often, but it was a book that really, really changed my life in the way, in terms of a great sense of understanding. Like it was,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I do that. Oh, I do that. Oh, I'm like this. Oh, I'm not a freak. Oh, I'm not antisocial because I prefer to, everyone goes to lunch and I'd rather go to a cafe by myself with a journal.
Mm-hmm.
Things like this. It was massively validating is the word. And so for all of you introverts at home who are listening, if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend that you do. All of the extroverts, if you want to understand how to work and maybe even learn a bit, cannot recommend this book enough. Anyway, get into it. But yeah, I'm a hardcore introvert. If there is a sliding scale, I am 90% way down the introverts end. Now, the irony is, trained actor, love being on stage, love having a spotlight, love having a microphone, give me all the attention all the time. Here's the funny thing though, the minute I'd step off stage, I'm not going to the after party. You've got audience waiting in the foyer, waiting to meet you. Like I'm like head down, like straight out the side door. Like I don't have the energy or the inclination to deal with any of you.
That is one thing I always wondered with you, being in that scene. And I don't know anything at a personal level about that kind of culture, industry, but you get the perception that just like you're talking about, after the show, there's a party. And just for my own thing, I could never imagine you there. It's just not. And if you were, it would be the guy in the corner with his drink, silently observing the room.
Generally.
Yeah. Okay.
Here's a funny thing. I was at a wedding. I was at a wedding this weekend just passed,
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, I hope she doesn't listen. I love her dearly. But I was at a wedding and the only person I knew was the bride. And we're quite good friends. Her now husband doesn't care for me so much, but that's another story. So we go to the wedding reception, right? And again, the only person I know is the bride, and it's going to be however long down at this function on the wharf. Everyone's going to be drinking and doing whatever. And so, if you're introverts at home, it's our idea of hell, right? Absolute hell. And because again, like if I only know the bride, like she's going to be doing the circle in the room. It's her day, whatever else. So you wait your turn and Jesus. So, so I had
You're not there. You're okay. It's all right.
I'm already hyperventilating. I've just lived through it. But so I like fresh bone linen suit, couture, like made in Thailand, crisp white collar, like looking like I knew I looked better than the bride. Go to the reception. I get there early. I'm like, I'm not going to walk in early. I'm going to hang back. I'm going to like give it 10-15. So come in, scan the room. Don't know anyone. Get, a non-alcoholic drink from the bar. Prop myself up at a table by myself. And there I was for a solid half hour because like the bride and groom hadn't arrived yet. And I'm sort of thinking to myself, like, how this is fuck.
Why did I sign up for this?
But like you had to go. Like I love her dearly. Of course, I can't miss this, right? Now, thankfully, I was adopted by Julien and his girlfriend Broedy, and Julien sort of half recognized me from something somewhere and remembered my name and came over and he's like, "Hey Chris, blah blah, it's my girlfriend Broedy," and they sort of adopted me for the night. So great. As my little introvert pod, I had someone I could connect with who was a decent human being, and we could have sort of decent conversation rather than just about the weather, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they sort of insulated me for the next 4 or 5 hours. But had it not been for them,
your social installation,
bruh. And that was the thing. Like, was it, and everyone's like, "Oh, wasn't there any other pretty girls?" No, or they had a partner. But short answer was no. When the bride finally arrived, I, hi, your day, congratulations, Mrs. Da 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 da, all that sort of thing. Had some snacks, had some cake, whatever else. thanked everyone and sort of tapped out. Reasonable. Wasn't first to leave, I don't think, but normally I am. But and that was that. Now and then got home. Now the funny thing was, and here's the aftermath of being such an introvert, is the following Saturday and the rest of the weekend, really, I was in a shit mood and I had no energy and no time for anyone. So, because I'd exhausted it in a room full of strangers and music and lads getting drunk and drunken toasts the night before for 4 or 5 hours, right? And you've got to keep that upbeat tempo. I'm having a night. You're not faking it, but you're just it's social energy, right? You need to keep the social energy and all that sort of stuff. And yeah,
which when you have none, like, I think that's the exhaustion, because you're creating on demand something that's not there.
Yeah, and so all right. So one of the symptoms, or one of the signs that you are an introvert is this sort of relationship. Is like, if you have to do social things, you have to sort of prepare yourself to, like, I'm gonna go to this thing. I need to sort of raise the energy to match the room. And then once I leave, you're like, oh, fuck, thank God, and you can sort of relax. And if you're anything like me, yeah, it taps you out the next day. I remember every keynote that I do, I adore being on stage, 500 people in a room, spotlight in the microphone, fantastic. And then it will wipe me out for the next 2 days.
Yeah. I don't even want to think about it.
Right. And I just have to roll with it. Because that's the way my body processes all this extra stuff. Now,
I wonder what, like, we're talking about now, right? Because this is the introvert's hell. What is an extrovert's hell? Is it a quiet room?
Or was it COVID? Right? Because all of a sudden, you don't get to commute anywhere. You don't get to meet everyone in the cafe before you head up into the office.
Social standing means nothing.
You can't hang out around the water cooler and make jokes and talk about the weekend. You can't do the drinks on the Friday night. You can't, collaborate with the team. All of this. I would imagine. I mean, it was as difficult for introverts in different ways, right?
Oh yeah.
Because, okay, let me be specific. It's not, from my understanding and from what I'm read, it's not that introverts don't like or appreciate, the crowd or the groups. It's more so like, if we can talk about, introverts have a preference to talk about something deeper than the sport, than the weather, than the time, than the job. You know what I mean? Yep. So the way I survived at the wedding was, I know Julian is a bit of an amateur filmmaker and documentary maker. And he'd spent the last year or so with Bree in a van, traveling around Australia, doing this and that.
Fucking
and I'm
cool.
Like, yeah. And I'm like, and I remembered, like, how's their filmmaking going? And then boom, like, we can talk about that for 20 minutes.
And it's real. It's real. It's something that means something to the other person.
It's like, it's a passion thing for him. And so you can sort of ask questions and get deeper into it, rather than like, oh, how do you know the bride and groom? Are you family? Are you friends? No. Like, by comparison, they had a friend, Tony, who joined us, who was a doctor, and like most medical bros love to talk medicine for the rest of the night. 3/4 of the way through the night, he realized I wasn't really drinking. And he's like, oh, you're not drinking, you're driving. You're like, no. I'm like, I don't drink. He's like, oh, good. Yeah, good. Look, I don't drink. Like, I don't drink much either. He's already done 2 shots and like however many other beverages, but then goes on for the next 15 minutes to tell like about his healthy lifestyle and sort of all this other sort of shit.
You fed him cues.
But again, like I did, so that's why you'll often find the introverts in the quiet corner, like with 1 or 2. So because it's quiet and we can actually talk and I can actually hear what you have to say. But it just gives you a little bit of a chance to talk about something deeper.
Well, yeah. I mean, then our extroverts, oh God, I'm going to get attacked. Is there something about the shallowness then of a social event that is the energy that you, because look, there's a very specific energy we're talking about here. And when you get into it socially, there are times that you can tap in and it feels good to be on the surface of it all, right? Like, and I'm just curious because we're both, and I think a little unintentionally, making extroverts sound in a sense shallow, right? Like,
I think I was going to say, I think that's an unfair term.
it's not.
I know what it's surface
level, and
but there's a lot of extroverts. Okay, imagine I know everyone knows a marketing chick. I know everyone knows that marketing chick who's just great at networking. You know what I mean? And she walks into the room and it's not so much about her, but she can introduce people and connect dots and go, you need to know them. And it's seamless. And you're like, fuck, man. Now that is a skill. And that is a skill that doesn't require, how's your mum? And like the deep dive into the world and the career. It's like, no. She knows how to, like, this is Broedy. This is where you need meet Chris.
Who and
guys,
what?
And she can work the entire room. Right. And then, so many event managers I know do this, and
that's a good point. And that's not, and you can't be shallow. You can't be shallow at that level. Like, but like you're saying, it is surface. Like they're touching on the things that are happening with who and what, but it's it's an art. Yeah. It's a fucking art. And it's not shallow. You're right. I don't like that term for it. I
get it. But like, if you're the snobby introvert, and normally, if you really want to take the cliche, if you're the snobby introvert in the corner and the extroverts seem more popular, then of course it's like, they're just talking about shit, they're getting drunk, and all this sort of stuff. I've actually got a note here because it's something that I wanted to ask. It's like, why it is covered in the book, but why do we associate the traits of, let's say, leadership and confidence and, dare I say, maybe even masculinity with an extrovert ideal? Like the idea of being loud and decisive and upfront is incredibly extroverted, and that seems to be like the ideal for sport leadership.
Well, I think
career
now
leadership, personal leadership, because that's alpha or some shit.
Yeah, I think that's now though. Like, I think that's changed because I'll be honest. As much as like leaders of the past had a personality and a presence, right? Like I've just finished for the second time the Discipline is Destiny book. Talks a lot about stoicism and guys of the past, and even Abraham Lincoln and those kind of guys, and a lot of the accounts for them, if you look at it on paper, they were introverts too. The most miraculous leaders, the most groundbreaking, they took their space, right? Like, and that was a fucking insurmountably important thing to most of them, especially. And it's funny. I wish I would have grabbed that. That would have been perfect from the book. There's just this piece of one of Abraham Lincoln's letters, and he just talks about the quiet of his office. And again, the man accomplished more than any of us are gonna fucking do. But at the same time, it wasn't just by being in the rooms. It wasn't just by doing the networking and talking. He was one of the people that needed to recharge in the office or in the hills or in the forest or whatever the hell it might have been. But I think that's, like you said, it's an interesting correlation now that leadership and someone of an influence generally is given that connotation. They have to be an extrovert. And
okay, then yeah, but tell me that 90% of social media isn't hinged on an extrovert model and ideal.
It is.
Right.
And that's what I mean. I think now it's completely shifted to where it's not so much the integrity of character and more it's just the general presence. And you can accomplish that very easily by being an extrovert. I just have to be in the room. I just have to be speaking. I just have to be relevant. And it's like, that's kind of what you and me have talked about, where I think, in all honesty, a lot of the people that proclaim to be extroverts and kind of operate in that field, the reason that they aren't as successful as they could be is because that's not who they are. They're playing this.
You mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a ton of them would rather not be the personality that they portray in.
It's also, yeah, I get it, but so this is something I learned from the book as well. It's like, it's not just your external representation. It's also, let's say, skill sets, for want of a better term. Like, there's a real heavy association of introverts with creativity for a couple of reasons. Is it because it generally requires isolation and quiet work and discipline? And this is something that overlaps on the Venn diagram with creativity very much. Like, I cement champion the case in my book, Applied Creativity, where it's not the group, it's the individual. And this is something that Susan talks about in Quiet. It's like there's this massive preference for the collective and the collaborative and this groupthink and that, of course, murders every introvert, because they're like, give me time and space to think about this thing, a little more deeply than what you're doing, and then to come back to you. And I'd argue that mastery of any subject, arts, any profession, requires, such a level of self-commitment, self-discipline, deep individual personal practice. And I use that term specifically because this is individual personal practice, normally in solitude, was what they found distilled the difference between, let's say, your orchestra pianist and your solo pianist. And it had nothing to do with skill sets and schooling, whatever else. It was the fact that the solo orchestra pianist,
example.
would put in 3 to 4 times the amount of individual solo practice. So basically all the stuff you don't see in rehearsal. And again, this is something I drill to every fucking corporate, is like, it's not what you see in front of you. It's the 10, 15 years of work. It's the 6 months of prep. It's the 2 weeks prior. It's all the stuff you don't see that introverts have a natural leaning to. Right. And it's more comfortable for them to, like, here's the project, take it away, go and work at it on their own, then come back, offer it to the group, whatever. Now that's that skill set. And now that objectively that skill set's available to everyone, but it sits more comfortably with some.
I think so
others,
too. Yeah. Because I know a couple that would be eaten alive if they had to take the work and go do it by themselves. I know. Yeah. Wouldn't happen.
Yeah, or find a way to delegate, or
exactly, right? Yeah, 100%. Here comes Joyce.
Yeah. But that deep sort of research, and so I guess it's finding out who you are and where you fit on this scale. And for the longest time, I can testify that I felt more of a weird kid than I was, because introversion wasn't discussed in this way. It was like, there's the extroverts and then there's everybody else. And the everybody else is socially awkward. And I knew I wasn't socially awkward. I can hold a conversation. I'm polite. I'm reasonably charming. I have no problem talking to women. So that didn't quite seem to fit. It's like, but why do I want to be on my own when everyone else is going for lunch or like going for drinks or going to dinner, and I'm bored. And I have to sit and grit teeth, like, to get through this thing. And it honestly wasn't until I read this, I go, oh shit, I'm not dysfunctional. I'm not antisocial. That's what this is. And this is why I think, as a subculture, I know in the US, it's different here in Australia because there's a much larger immediate Asian population here. So it's something we just sort of accept and understand. But there's a real subculture of what I see of young boys identifying with, when young boys identify with Japanese culture through like anime. Normally it's that introvert subset, like, because the anime is speaking, you know, obviously Japanese culture, Japanese relationships, the way they interact, all these sorts of things. It's projecting this introverted world.
Well, I was going to say, you look at most of the protagonists in any of that kind of thing, it's exactly like you're talking about. That is them. It is the extroverted, excluded, black sheep kid that.
Yeah. Or it's you know, it's the Shinji Ikaris if you're a Neon Genesis Evangelion fan, which is great anime. But most of the heroes, if they're young boys, it's traumatic upbringing. But they have some sort of mastery, but they have to work over time and step by step, like gain mastery and have an understanding. And so it's great storytelling, but there's a real sense of journey of how you build this thing build into the character and the hero that you're supposed to become. If you look at American heroes, it's like, oh, they're born like that. Oh, Superman is just the greatest.
So it's fun. While we're here,
Spider-Man got bit by a spider. Green Lantern just inherited a ring.
Well, even look at the one trending now, right? It's like what is that one? It's got Omni-Man, Invincible.
Oh,
right?
Invincible. Well, actually, quite like. Yeah,
I do like it as well. But it's very funny that you're drawing that correlation, because look at the protagonist. Well, I mean, he become no spoilers. Anyways, the protagonist is born that way. He's of another planet and blah blah blah, and this was just naturally bestowed upon him, and he's mightier and greater than all of the people that, you know, had those gifts received later in life or had to work for him. And it's like, bro, what this guy's just all like that.
I'll defend it a little bit.
Please do, because I'm American and I think it's garbage.
Okay, really? Okay, interesting.
I do. I think Batman's one of my favorite origin stories because of the trauma and the lack of advantage that he has.
Right, except he's got like...
Okay, stop. But he plays Superman with money, okay?
Yeah. No, okay. Look, we'll talk about comic books another time. But you can see the principles that have been demonstrated, and everyone sort of gets it. What else have I got in my notes here? Do you have any questions before?
Yeah, well, there's one thing that, and it's funny that we're here, and this is kind of the vein that we're in. One of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about, and we've touched on it briefly, is the impact of the opposite situation. So, like, we talked about the introvert's hell, and like, what would that be for the extrovert? I wonder what it is for us too when engaging with the opposite side, the things that we hide or curb or change for that exact moment.
That's a really great question, and it actually ties into what your definition of an introvert was and how you see yourself. Because one of the things that is talked about, in the book, is up until this point, we've believed that it's a binary, like you're introvert or extrovert. And then there might have been some gray area around like, a little bit more, no, like whatever, but you still kind of fit in one or two camps. There's studies and some research and a really great example done of there's something called, I've got it here, it's situationism. And I'm probably paraphrasing, but the point is that depending on the environment and the social crowd you're in, you will actually adapt your levels. So like you were saying, like if I'm with family, you know, I might behave in a certain way, or I might be much more extroverted for all of these kind of reasons. If I'm in a room full of strangers, you might, you know, in a room full of strangers, a natural extrovert will be the first one in the room to pick someone and go, "Hey, how you doing? My name's Chris," and go to shake hands, right? Yep. I can guarantee you that won't be me.
Yep.
Like unless everyone's really introverted, and then I'll be the one to try and be the social one and try and break the ice.
It would take a lot of pressure for me.
Right. So, but and it's a really great example because she uses a professor. She has a friend that's a professor that she uses as a case study where this guy can be on stage every week and giving lectures to the auditorium. And then when he's not there, he's alone in his home with his wife in the Canadian wilderness, and he'd rather be sitting and writing and reading and sending emails and not dealing with anyone. And there's a few other studies as well where they put a bunch of introverts in the room and a bunch of extroverts in the room, and they simulated a math class, but really they were recording social skills and interaction and tones of voice and body language and all these sorts of things. And they found that the introverts, those would raise their level to match the extroverts. Right. And sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's subconscious. And there's a reason, like after you leave certain classes, you might feel a little bit more drained. Whereas school was a great one. Maths, no doubt, math and science, I probably walked out going fucking fried. Drama, English, history would have walked out energized.
Yes, I do. Yeah. It's so strange because it's kind of, to me, like, then when you're talking about the change or exchange of energy, is it then that the introverts are doing that as another way to hide, right? Like,
shit. Okay. Sometimes yes.
Okay.
And that's what I keep referencing the book. I did say
that's fine.
Heavily.
Yeah. Yes.
But that is something that they flag as. I was talking about it 5 minutes ago. Like, you have to go to a social thing, so you have to raise your energy to a certain level. When I was with my ex, at least I was comfortable enough with her and my friends, and they knew, it's like, you have me for 60 minutes. You have me at your house party with a room full of strangers.
I just imagine you walking in with a fucking sand hourglass.
Bro, it was
slamming it on the table and saying,
little egg timer, turn it over, I'm out. But surely, like, sure, my girl would keep me company, but she's not there to babysit me. And like all the other friends and whatever else, like whatever. But you have.
But I think that's a healthy dynamic, though. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Sure, but it's maybe. But then imagine all the extroverts who are listening who are like, what the fuck? Like, party hasn't even started.
I know 60 minutes is like the appetizers. Like,
right.
Where the fuck are you?
And then looking at me like, every time I invite you, you bail. Like, you're here for an hour and you bail. Like, so.
See, this is what I'm talking about. Like,
and this is what I was wondering too. Because if you ask, like, if introverts can, raise their level to sort of mask whatever, I'm wondering if ever are extroverts equally aware, and do they tone themselves down a little, just connect with one person at a time?
No, and that's what I mean too. Like, and like you said, for instance, this study, like, is it something that we do subconsciously, right? It's not even necessarily like we're talking about, where we are consciously aware of the energy that we have, and we're going into these situations kind of with a set of parameters. But I don't think a lot of people do. So then, if it is subconscious, what the hell drives that? Come
on, man, we're social animals.
Yeah,
we're social animals. You adapt,
so then,
to doing what's around you in order to fit in, to be safe.
Right, but then, like, so then I guess my question is, what dictates which one wins, right? Like like your joke question in the beginning, which one is better? Is it the dominance of the room? Like, would it be that the room is primarily introverts and it's a quiet, calm, kind of separated, solitary room? Or is, what decides whether the room becomes the introverts or the extroverts?
Yeah, I don't have an answer.
I wish she did. Where's quiet now?
Right. Well, and again, it's that catchphrase of read the room. Like, imagine. Okay, here's two examples, and I'm pretty sure I referenced both of them in my book. It's like, you're sitting at the board. You're sitting at the board of GE when Jack Welch was running it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if you know anything about Jack Welch, specifically when it came to board meetings, he's like, you come with ideas in mind, and you are going to debate them at the table, and he makes this big deal about like open candor and collaboration, because if you're just open and straightforward,
Wasn't he one of the first ones to say too, if you have nothing to bring to the room, don't walk in?
Pretty much. Yeah. That's right. So you debate this thing, and so in that GE Jack Welch style of collaboration, collaboration in boardrooms were open vocal debates, right? Okay. So number one, you tell me how an introvert would function in that space, like having to match the loudest in order to be heard. Because from everything I've read and from what I know of Jack Welch, it wouldn't have been facilitated to accommodate anyone. Because in their view, in the view of the room, the loudest cares the most. You know, and the loudest is the most important, and the loudest should win, for instance, right? So there's one example. And that was held as the benchmark of how you run a board, how you make decisions, the pinnacle of an ELT, an executive leadership team. And I asked the question, well, if that's the case, and if that's the case in corporate America, are you saying that no one anywhere else operating a different method can come up with any decent ideas? So if I go to the boardroom of Toyota in Japan, do you think they're going to run a meeting like this? And if they don't, are you saying that their ideas are substandard? Now, could you imagine then being the loud American sitting at the board of Toyota to then say,
how quickly would the extrovert become the introvert?
Or just become the joke and be sidelined? And they would have, probably have no idea.
I'm going to fall back. I genuinely think it's like you said, that I don't know if you could put an extrovert in that situation and that their personality would, I think the introvert would overtake. I think it's like you said, you just said it, read the room. And I think subconsciously human beings do that, whether they mean to or not. Yes. And you take, for instance, a loud American, throw him in that boardroom. He's not saying a fucking word. He's not saying. I do. And again, that's kind of what I was asking. Like, what in turn drives that then? And how does each side, once they're cast into the opposition, learn from that experience? Because that dude sitting in the boardroom, that's the first motherfucking time he's listened for quite some time.
There's one of the chapters in Quiet was how do you talk to the other side? There's another chapter in there as well about like what happens if you have introvert kids. Like, how do you raise introvert kids in a world that isn't ready to listen to them? But the one I thought was interesting was how do you talk to the other side? And I think there's an example there of laid out all the traits and strengths that introverts have. Mm-hmm. And then there was a female introvert who was married to a male extrovert. And at times there was obviously some real friction in their relationship, because he would, I think family functions, like he'd just invite everyone over. Mm-hmm. And she's like, what the fuck? Like, am I supposed to do? Like, and who am I supposed to talk to? And sort of everything else. And there's this some tension. Funnily enough, it's something that my mother became good at. Like, she would sort of hate going to family functions if it wasn't in her home. Like, whenever we went to Nan's, she'd sort of be uncomfortable and be the wallflower. But in her own home with her own kitchen, she could play host. You know what I mean? And she was comfortable in her own space, and she'd have no problem having the whole family over. So,
falls back to that environment.
Right, with a little bit of discussion and conversation but clearly about what you need. Like, it sounds ridiculous on paper. Like, when I go to your mother's house and all the family's there, I feel uncomfortable. But if all the family was in my house, I'd be fine. It sounds like a ridiculous concept, but
it does. But at the same time, it's like you said, once you kind of get into this vein of exploring these things to the other side, not just your own position, but to the other side, it becomes less silly. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It really
Yeah.
does. And it becomes a lot more understandable. And I mean, I'm speaking from an introvert listening about another introvert, but at the same time, I think if I was a full blown extrovert, it wouldn't be hard for me to understand that sentiment.
Is Tiff an extrovert?
More than I am, that's for sure.
Right.
That's for sure.
Because my question was like, could you date an extrovert? And I'm thinking back, and I think my ex was more of an extrovert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
she loves the social functions, the family
right,
get-togethers, the going out and being around people doesn't bother her. Yeah, no, she 100% more than I am. And what I like about it and have over the years is same thing. I've found myself when I'm cast into that other side trying to learn, like for
yeah,
me,
yeah,
my biggest question I'm always asking is like, what's driving these guys? Because it's not the booze. It's not just necessarily the family connection. It's not the campfire. It's almost like I said, there's an energy to these situations that some people very easily tap into.
hmm
And I'm envious of that. You know what I mean? So I've tried over the years learning those little independent pieces that I can tap into the room. And if I didn't have her pushing me to do those things, I can guarantee you I wouldn't be doing those things.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think I could. And I think if I'm being honest with you, my best match would always be somebody farther down the other side of the scale.
I think I'd agree. I
Yeah.
think I'd agree because, and I'd also, yeah, I think I'd agree because, like you said, it'd be a good balance for me if I had.
Yep.
I need to push myself to get out of the apartment at times. So if I had someone else who was like, "Hey, let's go do a thing," um, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and look,
And
it's
I
shit that you don't think of either. It's like
mm,
when, with you and I, right? Like my idea of getting out of the house is I'm going to go on a walk. I'm not going to see another motherfucker on that walk.
yeah,
I'm not going to talk with anybody. I'm just going to get out of the house and go on a walk. For her, it would be to go to an event, go to a reptile museum with the kids, go to whatever the hell this thing is over here, or meet
mm,
somebody here and do
set up
this
a dinner
thing.
party or something.
And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, dude, I wouldn't even gone there in a million motherfucking years. And it's
yeah,
so the thing that's so refreshing about it to me is it gives me a grasp on the availability of my time. Because for instance, in my little introvert head, I go, I have X, Y, and Z to do, and then all the rest is personal time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
But
it's a priority. It is a priority, but at the
yeah,
same time, I wish I could slice that down just a little bit smaller and make myself a little bit more available. And yeah, like I said, I think if I was with someone that was like me, I'm going to be dead honest with you. Even it would be the most heartbreaking thing. It would be the most heartbreaking thing.
you think?
I'm being, yeah, I
Because
do.
you
I
both
could,
never leave the house.
right. And I think over a long period of time, regardless of how much we loved each other individually, if it came to that point and neither one of us could move to the other side of the scale, you know?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that sort of energy would be useful for me as well. Um, well, we'll see. We'll see. I'd also think that I would like to think that someone like that could appreciate my independence because
Well,
as much as, I would love a partner or whatever else, there'd be certain things and boundaries where I'm like, I am going to do this like individually.
exactly. And that's the thing too that I've noticed. It rubs both ways, right? Like, so for instance, Tiffany for a long time would, even when she'd go to the store or something like that, she'd want to take one of the kids. It was always, I want somebody around or with me. And,
Mm-hmm.
over the years, she's watched how I engage with myself and, my own mental space and things like that. And she picks up on it. And I think she realizes too, even as much of an extrovert as I am and how much I crave that interaction and social attention, I do realize there's sometimes I need to recharge my battery, and the best way to do that is to be alone. And I don't
Mm.
think, again, that's something that she would have come to as soon as she did in her life if she hadn't been around somebody that did that. So,
That was I received that compliment last week actually from Gigi,
mhm.
funnily enough, which was quite sweet. But she commented like you've got no problem being on your own, like by yourself.
Which is a compliment.
It was, because it was interesting because after, I don't know, 20 or 30 years of marriage, she's realizing now and sort of struggling with, I'm not happy unless my husband's around. Like independently, like I'm a little bit lost and I can't hook all of my happiness on him. So they're going through this awkward phase of, you go and do what you want to do over there, and she's trying to find what's going to make her happy without having sort of her crutch around. And she feels a little bit naked and lost. That's really interesting. And yeah, that's when she said to me, it's like, because you've got no problem like being on your own. So yeah, I also haven't been married for 20 something years. So it's, you know, there's a balance in all things, but sort of to land at a neat and tidy spot, Misfits, it's about understanding, again, talk about everything, solve nothing. It's about understanding who you are and how you operate, because surely that's going to help you in your relationships, in your work, just even in your personal life, you know, when people aren't around or when they are around, and how to deal with them. So I know we probably lent heavily into being introverts on this episode, probably because we're both down that end of the scale, and probably to give all the introverts at home a voice, because it wouldn't be so often that, you know, you get to be heard in the room. I know that's something that introverts can seem to struggle with, of actually standing up, getting on the soapbox and go, no, look at me for a moment, I have something to say, and claiming that space. Another, just before we part, like another trait that introverts have is that we're a lot more selective about who we let in. Like our social circle is much, much smaller, much, much tighter than your standard extrovert. And so if there's something that we can learn from extroverts, is probably how to loosen up and get a bit more flexible and a bit more warm with our social circle. Right. I think that's something that we can be taught, and that's something we can sort of lean into. B, any Jerry Springer final thoughts?
No, I'll fight all the extroverts. That's it. Let's go. Introverts are better.
So there you go, Misfits. There's episode 7 on Introverts and Extroverts for season 3. Broedy, do you know what's coming up for episode 8?
8, we have a guest.
Take a drink every time Broedy goes looking for the run sheet, because he doesn't know.
Hands off the mouse.
All right. So we're taking, speaking of fighting, we're talking about violence. Controversial Misfits. You're right. We have a guest. So we're bringing in Tyler Schmoker, who's ex-US military, now industry security specialist and marathon running, mountain climbing, ultra athlete, all round really, really cool guy from Minnesota. So he's coming on, and we're talking about violence, and is it a necessary evil? In the words of Cersei Lannister, when should we choose violence? Is it inherently a bad thing, or can it do good? And this is, a little bit controversial, but that's why we're here, right?
Yes, sir.
Broedy, hot takes on violence. Sometimes, always, never.
Depends on the day. I'll give you the same answer from the first question you asked me on this episode. Depends on the day, my friend.
Depends on the day. That's fine. So that's what we're going to get into for episode 8, Misfits. You can be listening to it now if you're a member of camp, and you can be listening to episode 9 as well. But in the meantime, I've been Chris.
I've been Broedy.
And you stay classy, Misfits. We'll see you on the next one.